Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video of the Global Awareness Report. We are just going to jump straight into it from the very north to the very south of the front line in Ukraine. And we have reports that the Ukrainians have captured Novosibirsk to the west of Kuzamivka. And they have pushed all the way up to this train station right here. And that there is a pretty intense battle for this area. It's important for the northern Luhansk front because it is a major highway and rail network right here, which can help the Russians if they wanted to push to the north. They could use the highway to help with that advance and secure this area if they wanted to, and Ukraine can use it to push towards Svatove. They can use the highway, and they have settlements that lead to Svatove, which is a major hub in the north of Luhansk for the Russian forces. So this area right here is very important for this front. So Ukraine capturing this settlement right here is important for the battle for northern Luhansk. Moving down to the south here, Russian forces have captured Krasnopolivka. According to the Wagner private military corporation or company, they have captured this town right here. They announced it on their Telegram. This has not been corroborated by any other sources besides them, but I think it's fairly safe to say that they have captured this town, simply because of how small it is and how difficult it would be to defend. I think it's fairly likely that they have captured this town. Also, the Wagner PMC, they seem to be decently reliable when it comes to their reports. So moving down here, where I have created a new, I forgot to name this one, but it should be named contested area. But this sort of gray polygon, this gray zone or contested area, is going to now be on the map in areas which is difficult to say who controls exactly. So this area right here, there are reports that Russians have entered this area and that Russian forces control this sort of area, but that's not confirmed, as there are reports that Russians have attacked this settlement right here, which would mean that they would have to have established some kind of control over this train station and this residential area, but it's unknown whether they have actually established control over here or not. But there are reports that they've attacked this town, so it's just some conflicting reports that is now in this gray area. You know, the status of this is heavily contested or unknown who controls this area. Moving down to the south of Bakhmut, the town of Kleshivka and the fortification on the hill have been captured by Russian forces, and they have pushed to the north and are now attacking Ivanitske. There are reports of Russian forces attacking Ivanitske, Bilohora, Dalivka, and even these towns over here to the west. There are reports of Russians attacking these towns. It is very difficult terrain, so capturing these towns would actually be very difficult. But they have sent, most likely, some kind of reconnaissance group or special forces to harass or probe the defenses of these settlements right here. But as you can see on the map and using the terrain, we can see that the terrain is very difficult and very rough in this area. So actually capturing this area would be quite difficult. But the Russian forces have not captured, but they have attacked these two settlements as well. So this Klashivka front, mini front here has really expanded, and the Russians look like they're going to try and capture Bilohora and Delivka and continue to push to the west towards Konstantinivka. It's what it looks like they might try to do, something like that. And they'll obviously try to take Ivanetsk and cut off Bakhmut, and only leaving this one little road for Ukrainians to retreat. The Russians are trying to put as much pressure on Bakhmut as possible so that the Ukrainian forces will retreat from the area, and so Russia can take the town without much of a fight. Moving on towards Zaporizhzhia, there are reports that Russian forces have captured all of these settlements right here. However, it is only one source that says this, which is Rybar. So I'm not sure if this is actually under Russian control or not. It appears that there is a big contested area right here where Ukrainian sources claim that all of this stuff is under Ukrainian control, and pro-Russian sources appear to mostly be in agreement that this stuff is under Russian control. Ukrainians say that this offensive is not really much of an offensive at all, but just some sporadic attacks that have no real impact, while the Russian side claims that this is a major offensive in the Zaporizhzhia front. We will have to wait and see for confirmation about these towns in the coming days, but I'm pretty sure that this town, Male Shibrake, this area right here, has been captured by the Russians. But the rest of these towns I cannot confirm. And so that is not all for the Ukraine war. That is all for our frontline updates, but we still have some more news regarding the Ukraine war. There are two important things happening here. We're going to start off with 16 people, including the Minister of the Interior, died in a helicopter crash on the 18th. The Minister of Internal Affairs and the Deputy and the Secretary of State crashed into a kindergarten in Brovary, a suburb of Kiev. The crash killed 14 people, including the aforementioned Secretary of the Interior and his deputy and the Secretary of State. And even some children were killed in the crash. And apparently around 25 people were injured, including 11 children. So this is a major development because the Secretary of the Interior, or the Minister of the Interior, is a very important position, and so is the Secretary of State in Ukraine. These are very important government positions, and the fact that they all appeared, the fact that 3 major people just died in one helicopter crash, has led to conspiracy theories about the situation. Was this? It doesn't appear to be a Russian and a missile striking the helicopter, as eyewitness reports say that there was no missile. It was a very foggy day, so that is probably what it was technical helicopter malfunctions and the fact that it was a foggy day, limiting pilot visibility, that caused this crash. That's most likely what it was, but it is of course possible that it was sabotaged by the Russians, or maybe it was the Ukrainians themselves trying to assassinate these people for whatever reason. It is possible, though I highly doubt that that is the case. And we're going to move over to the United States has said that it will send the Stryker vehicles to Ukraine in a $2.5 billion aid package, including high mobility rocket systems, 59 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles with accompanying ammunition and tow anti-tank missiles, 53 mine-resistant ambush protected vehicles, 350 high-mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicles, high-speed anti-radiation missiles, tens of thousands of various artillery rounds. So a major aid package to Ukraine. The Stryker is quite the vehicle. Here I can bring it up right here. This is from militarytoday.com. It entered service in 2003, and it has a speed of about 100 kilometers an hour. That's the maximum road speed. And it has a ton of different variants, including the mobile gun system, which is a massive turret mounted on top of the Stryker, which can provide anti-tank support and direct fire support for infantry. It is quite the system. It is being retired by the United States right now. The United States is not interested in continuing the service of the Stryker, so that is why they are sending it to Ukraine. But it will probably be pretty good in Ukrainian terrain and against Russian vehicles. So I'm sure the Ukrainians are going to be welcoming this with open arms, because they are constantly in need of new equipment, because this war is obviously very expensive in terms of equipment and in terms of money and in terms of manpower, obviously. So the United States is continuing to support Ukraine in every way it is willing to. As well as the United States and the Ukrainian top military commanders have met in person for the first time on the 17th. I'm not sure where exactly, but somewhere near the Ukrainian border, probably. I've just marked this as Lubin, but I'm not sure if that's the actual town. Anyways, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, met with Ukrainian's chief of military officer, Valery Zaludny, in an undisclosed location somewhere in the southeast of Poland. This has... Apparently they talked about a possible Russian invasion from Belarus. Those were some rumors that they talked about. But the Ukrainian military and the United States military, as well as other NATO militaries, are increasingly becoming more and more integrated in their capabilities, obviously. The United States has provided a lot, just so much military aid to Ukraine, and as well as intelligence aid and training and all this. And then now the heads of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for the United States and the Ukrainian and the top Ukrainian military officer are now meeting together in person. So this all comes as it is expected that Russia is going to launch some new offensive, maybe in the north, maybe again in Kharkiv once more. Perhaps this Zaporizhzhia offensive was the major offensive that they were talking about, but anyways, we are not so sure as to what is the next major Russian move. You can check the the last video I made where I talked about that and showed a map of where I think the most possible Russian offensives were to occur, and I listed Zaporizhzhia as one of them, so perhaps I've been proven correct here, but we'll have to wait and see about these reports in Zaporizhzhia. So that's pretty much all of the news regarding the Ukraine war directly. We're going to move on to some geopolitical news. This news sort of relates to the Ukraine war, but at the same time it doesn't. This comes from the Ministry of Defense, is Telegram. The Russian Ministry of Defense announces a major military expansion of an increase, which would increase the Russian military by 50% by 2026. So they want to build up the armed forces to be 1.5 million troops. And they are going to also reorganize the military a little bit by founding two new interbranch strategic territorial formations in Leningrad and Moscow, as well as new self-contained groups of forces in the regions of the Russian Federation. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but the Russian military works, how it works is that it has military districts. I don't have a map of the military districts of Russia, but you can easily find it on Wikipedia, where it has the sort of the south, the north, I think the center, and Siberia, and the Far East. And so these military districts, the units within them are I'm trying to think of the word here. I can't think of the word about how it works, but these military districts are sort of how the Russian army is organized. And so I think they're going to add a Moscow military district and a Leningrad military district. I think that is what they're saying, as well as to establish an army corps in the Republic of Karelia, which is this right here. It's just north of Leningrad and south of Murmansk, right on the border of Finland. They are going to establish a new army corps of 3 motorized rifle divisions and 2 airborne assault divisions. Reorganize 7 motorized rifle brigades in the west, central, and eastern military districts and in the northern fleet into motorized rifle divisions. So they're reorganizing brigades into divisions, so increasing their scale, as well as just general changes and increases of military power in Russia. So this is a pretty major news. This is less to do with the war in Ukraine. It seems more to do with just general increasing of the military budget and a reorganization of the Russian military in general. Because this is going to be from 2021 through 2026 is the plan. So this is not any so it's quite a short time frame, but I doubt that this war is going to still be going on by 2026. That is very, very unlikely that it's going to be raging on for that long. We talked about Total Energies opening a second LNG import terminal in the special video I uploaded, catching up with all of the geopolitical headlines. The United Kingdom has agreed to send Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine, which is pretty significant because the Challenger 2 is quite a capable modern main battle tank. It first entered service in 1994, and it is a very capable modern tank and capable modern main battle tank. It is being replaced by the Challenger 3, which is set to enter service by 2027. So that is probably why they are sending over the Challenger 2, is because the United Kingdom is going to slowly start phasing the Challenger 2 out of service, so why not send it to Ukraine? And that's the major theme that we're seeing with aid to Ukraine, is that they're not being sent the latest and greatest weapon systems. They're being sent weapon systems that are going to be phased out, or being phased out, like the Marder, the AMX-10, the Bradley, the Challenger 2, you know, all of these things are being phased out. Like the Paladin artillery systems, I think, is also probably going to be phased out. But Ukraine isn't exactly complaining, because these are still capable weapon systems that are still going to be good for Ukraine's army. And it is said that Ukraine is building up a army corps of all of these modern tanks and equipment in order to push somewhere and have a massive counteroffensive somewhere similar to Kharkiv or Kherson. I'm not sure exactly where. I think it's either in the north of Luhansk or in Zaporizhzhia. Again, watch my last global awareness report for that. Not the special episode, but the one uploaded just before the special episode. So we are going to move on to a lot of news coming from the World Economic Forum and Germany's decision to not send Leopard 2s to Ukraine. So Poland has said it's going to send Leopard 2s. Other countries have said it's going to send Leopard 2s. But Germany says that it is not going to send Leopard 2s unless the United States also sends Abrams tanks to Ukraine. And they are facing quite a bit of backlash from their allies over this. You can go to the map and read the articles here. But this is an interesting decision. I'm not sure why Germany is not sending Leopard 2s. You can read the article and maybe they'll give some kind of explanation, but I did not have enough time to read all of these articles, you know, word for word. There's a lot going on, and you know, I don't have the time to read every single article, but maybe you do, and so maybe you can leave your thoughts and opinions as to why Germany is not sending the Leopard 2s in the comments. And some other news, NATO is, I forgot to mention this, but NATO has temporarily deployed some surveillance planes to Romania, I believe in order to monitor Russian military activity near the borders of the 30-nation military alliance. So not necessarily to help Ukraine, but to just monitor any kind of military buildup along maybe Belarus, in Poland, or in the Baltics, or in around Moldova, around Transnistria. Anyways, I forgot to mention that, but we are going to move over to the World Economic Forum, which is currently going on as of the recording of this video, I believe. The United States and Chinese officials discuss climate and the economy. The Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, and held her first face-to-face meeting with the outgoing Vice Premier Liu He in Zurich, in Switzerland, where they talked about various economic and climate policies and the like, but it's quite a long article here. And I don't want these videos to be 40 minutes long, so I'm going to try to get through these. An interesting a piece of news where Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, writes to a letter to China, the president of China, Xi Jinping, in order to have talks, according to his wife, who said that the letter is being handed over to in Davos, which is where the World Economic Forum is held, to the Chinese delegation. Zelensky has repeatedly sought to make contact with Xi since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February last year, and hoping that Beijing will use its influence over Russia and Russia's leader Vladimir Putin in order to try to de-escalate the war or something like that. So I doubt China is going to listen to Zelensky. Russia is too important of a partner for China to risk that relationship being strained. It's already strenuous, but it's already a little bit strenuous, and Russia and China have conflicting interests in Central Asia. So I doubt Xi Jinping is going to listen to that request. Another very important piece of economic news. This is a very big news. Saudi Arabia says that it is open to settling trade in other currencies. Saudi Arabia is open to discussions about trade in other currencies other than the US dollar, according to the kingdom's finance minister. There are no issues with discussing how we settle our trade agreements, whether it is in the US dollar or whether it is in the euro, whether it is in the Saudi riyal. Mohammed Al-Jidan told Bloomberg TV on Tuesday in an interview in Davos. This was in Davos, but I put it in the capital because Switzerland was getting all crowded with markers. So just for clarity, I put it in the Saudi capital, though he was in Davos when he made this statement. This is very important news because Saudi Arabia only trades oil in the US dollar. It's called the petrodollar. The United States and the American dollar are quite reliant on crude oil being sold in dollars in order to prop up the US dollar and make it a more powerful currency and make it a more valuable currency, and to have it be the world reserve currency. So people will buy reserves of dollars in case of economic crisis because that's how crude oil is traded in. But if Saudi Arabia starts selling and trade in other currencies, that would jeopardize the petrodollar. And that would lead to other oil exporting countries to also not sell in just US dollars. So that would really tank the dollar in terms of its value. And I believe that's all the time we really have. We're just going to read the headlines. The president of Vietnam quits as the Communist Party intensifies a graft crackdown on corruption and stuff like that. So there is a lot of anti-corruption reforms and crackdowns going on in Vietnam right now, so much so that the president quits his office in Vietnam. In Fiji, the military warns the government against sweeping changes after tight elections. This is concerning because I believe that the military has actually did a coup d'etat in Fiji once, around 30 or so years ago. I could be wrong on that, but I believe there was actually once a military coup in Fiji. So the military is warning the government, do not make too many changes, or the military might take action against the government. As well as in Peru, over 50 injured as protests continue to cause nationwide chaos. We reported on this a few weeks ago, that Peru is undergoing major strife and civil unrest because of the president attempting to hold power when he was meant to resign. I think it was something along those lines. So this So these protests and chaos are continuing to affect Peru, not Brazil. Although Brazil has had its own issues with protesters storming government buildings after the election of its left-wing president. In other economic news, the Treasury resorts to extraordinary measures after the United States has hit its debt limit. This Treasury Secretary notified Congress that her office will begin implementing extraordinary measures to keep the government from defaulting on its debt. The nation's debt climbed to more than $31.4 trillion this week. Federal financial data shows that crossing the threshold set by Congress when it last raised the national borrowing limit more than a year ago. To avoid default, Yellen previously detailed emergency measures her department would prepare in order to stave off a default. So the United States is undergoing difficult financial troubles right now because the United States is at its debt limit, and if it goes past that debt limit, it will have to default on its debts, meaning bankruptcy. And so the United States will do everything it possibly can to avoid bankruptcy, of course. And we're going to just go right over here. Our last bit of news for the episode. The United States is to impose new sanctions against the Wagner private military group, calling it a transnational criminal organization. It freezes any assets of Wagner and prohibits Americans from providing funds, goods, or services to the group. Wagner, of course, being essential to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as I'm sure you know. We've talked about the group many times. So that's going to be it for this episode of the Global Awareness Report. I try to make these short, but there's so much information that it gets difficult. So, but I hope that you found this episode valuable. I hope that you learned more about what's going on in the war in Ukraine and more about what's going on in the world. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and leave any feedback. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.